Alternative Dig Talk. Real issues, real talk.
Fellow citizens, following the sequence of events, Uganda seems to be at political crossroads.
I'm not a servant of anybody.
Madam, I know the law.
As such, Alternative Digital brings you the Interface Show with retired Colonel Dr. Kizza Besigye.
Let's keep on the same page on Alternative Digital.
As he gives you the alternatives on the transition question, rule of law, human rights and freedom, youth inclusion in governance, economic stagnation, as he confirms.
I'll be always here, Saturday from 10 a.m. in the morning. Be there.
Don't miss the live discussion on the Alternative Uganda, Digitalk TV Facebook pages, and the Alternative Uganda YouTube channel.
Migrant stakeholders run biya birimwebi jemisinde zigenda okubera kusawa ekololo ku Sunday nga 2 October tudduka okusonda sente okuddaabiriza ekifo ekibudabuda bankuba kyeyo nga bakomyewo eddembe lya bannayuganda bakolebwe buvunaanyizibwa bwaffe era kitukakatako okulwanirira eddembe n'obwenkanya mu mirimu gy'abankuba kyeyo n'olwekyo weetabe mu kuddaabiriza ekifo kino ng'ogula kiti ya $2.5 okuva ku petrol station za Shell Kabalagala, Shell Lugogo, Capital, Shell Najjanankumbi, Shell Nansana, Shell Namave ne Shell Buloba. Biwagidwa Star Times, Reham, Fresh Dairy, Roofings, Housing Finance Bank, Maritime Cargo. Olwo ne bikutusibwa ku ofisi ya President ku nsonga z'emitala w'amayanja, UERA ne Migrant Workers Voice. Nebitegekebwa Sinat Advertising.
The Alternative Dig Talk. Real issues, real talk.
Our viewers, we must apologize for having had this delay. My name is Norman Tumuhimbise. You know, we're meant to begin at 11, but some things came on and we had to prioritize them because they were also concerning Justice Kanyeihamba. But nonetheless, we are at least here. We are beginning straight away. I'm Norman Tumuhimbise. We are streaming live on our social media page. That's the Alternative Uganda and also Digitalk TV. We are with Justice Kanyeihamba today, Wednesday as always, and we are giving an insight also on other chapters in this constitution for which him and others made, but also to be specific, he was the chairperson, Legal and Drafts Committee of the 1995 Constitution. Justice Kanyeihamba, say hello to our viewers.
Hello, viewers. I greet you, and I apologize for this delay. It was purely my own doing. I was doing something which I couldn't help doing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Please, Justice Kanyeihamba, we need to proceed straight away. And in particular, there is this that caught so many of your viewers' eyes, and want to begin with Chapter 1 of the Constitution. And this goes with the sovereignty of the people of Uganda. And in particular, it's Sabbatical 1. All power belongs to the people who shall exercise their sovereignty in accordance with this constitution.
That's right. I want you to remember that the constitution was made by representatives of all sections of Uganda, representing all the districts, counties, sub-counties, mirukas, and the disabled, the military, the women, the disabled, and we all unanimously agreed that the constitution we put in place shall be supreme law of Uganda, And after we promulgated it, President Museveni, the president of the Republic of Uganda, undertook to protect it, saying it was the best Ugandans had ever made, and they would go to the bush once more if anybody interfered with it. So, having made it in that way, we put there a provision that the only body which can alter or amend it is Parliament, which is the representative of the people. Not a caucus, because the caucus of the NRM is not representative of the whole country. We are in court on that issue because President Museveni said he's going to call a caucus and amend the constitution so that his own personal beliefs are reflected in the new amended constitution. The case is yet to be heard. But when we say power belongs to the people, which they shall exercise through their representatives, we meant it. And there is no other method of amending the constitution except by the people themselves. Any party or leader who wants to bypass that system is wrong and should not be believed in, however high and mighty he or she may be. So we said, not only do they exercise the power which they hold, but they can exercise it through their elected representatives. A caucus is an interest group of one party. It is not believed in or elected by everyone. So that's the first hurdle we have, that the NRM caucus does not represent the whole country, and therefore they have no power to amend a constitution made by the whole country. So that is the meaning
of the power being
belonging to the people.
But before, I want to take you back briefly about the...
Where is this young man who was listening to me?
He's around. He's just watching you. He's just behind there. Yeah. Because there is what is very key in the preamble itself about the objectives, and this is in particular duties of a citizen, because literally there must be those specific duties of the citizen that you people, as you made this constitution, assigned to all of us as citizens. And the duty number one is to participate, is to be patriotic, loyal to Uganda, and protect its belongings. As you see, these Ugandans apparently, are they patriotic? Beginning with your either former workmates as ministers or presidential advisors, plus your friend Tibuhaburwa. Are they that patriotic?
I am writing a book. I'm near finishing it. And it is called President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, I Have Known, and Mr. Tibuhaburwa, I Didn't Know. That book will soon be published. So sometimes those of us who made the constitution are criticized for having given the president too much power. I can tell you we didn't. If you look at my first book, following the promulgation of the Constitution, entitled Kanyeihamba's Commentaries on Law, Politics, and the Governance, there is no power we gave the president other than the prerogative of mercy, for which he can make or unmake laws of Uganda. However, those of us who are Christians, we remember the story of Judas Iscariot. He was specially selected by our Lord Jesus Christ. But eventually he betrayed Jesus. Similarly, President Museveni, who we trusted to uphold and protect the Constitution, and he saw to that effect, has betrayed the people of Uganda and those who made the Constitution by substituting himself as the people. That is what really has happened.
So literally, in your view, majority of the leaders are no longer patriotic?
No. Sorry?
In your view, majority of the citizens, of the leaders are not, or
they were used to make the ruling party very powerful. And when they finished that job, the ruling party and its leadership just threw them in that pit.
I want to take you back to the rights and other freedoms as they were in this preamble, where you had an argument with your colleagues that all rights were not the same, were not equal, rather. And I sent you this document last 3 or so days about the statutory instruments by the Ministry of Justice, and this goes to the conditions for bail in court. What's your view about the same instruments?
Some kind of person sent me the proposals of what the Chief Justice of Uganda, Prof. Owiny, has put out as guidelines to the grant of bail by the courts. It is very sad because, first of all, it repeats exactly what is in the law today. So he has not done his homework, the Chief Justice. Secondly, it derogates from those fundamental principles which are firmly established already. And I want him to remember he clashed with President Museveni on the memorial service of Ben Chwanuka.
In fact, it's even there now. It's even there today. It's a Ben Chwanuka Day, something like that. I've just read it somewhere. It's there now. It's on.
Is what?
The memorial of Ben Chwanuka. It is also. This is his day today. The president. Yeah, the president is also there.
So it is sad. The Chief Justice, we are suing President Museveni, the NRM, and the Attorney General for threatening to amend the President's law on bail. Museveni wisely withdrew when we were petitioning for a judgment. I don't know how the Chief Justice can now justify that, having said the law and the procedures on bail is well settled by the president's structure, how can he come and unashamedly say, I'm proposing guidelines? These guidelines, I hope the lawyers and the judges will discuss them and discard them as diversionary and unimportant, and they will retain what the Chief Justice said, that the law relating to bail was settled long time ago. So I think that the proposals by the Chief Justice are a red herring. They were prompted by his fear of President Museveni's comments, and they should not see the day of justice in this country.
I want to take you straight to Section 13 of this statutory instrument. Section 13, subsection 1, paragraph H, that the one of the conditions is on whether there is a likelihood for the applicant to commit another offense. How applicable and constitutional is such an provision?
That is already settled. One of the reasons for the current validation of court decisions, why the courts today and the magistrates refuse to grant bail, is the likelihood of the suspect interfering with the course of justice. It's already covered. So he wants to duplicate it with a guideline. It's not unnecessary.
Can you relate that to the preventive arrest that police has always used, especially to Dr. CJ or Kyagulanyi and other opposition members, where they always allege that you are not under arrest, but you are rather under protective or arrest, for lack of another word, that in the event that you are let free, you are likely to commit another crime. So is there any relationship between such a bail condition and also preventive arrest?
To say that the suspect will interfere with investigation, so it's very speculative and false. So there is no real evidence, with a few exceptions, which can be dealt with by the police, that suspects generally interfere with the course of justice. So it is not necessary.
If you were still an active justice of Supreme Court, would you defy in court now, your immediate supervisors' ideas in regards to bail application and granting?
I would reject that. I've told all the judges and all the lawyers to reject the guidelines issued by the Chief Justice because they are not necessary. The current law already covers the situations he has enumerated. So I would oppose it.
In your view, do you think they are, as a result of Mr. Museveni's suggestion or backing onto judiciary for over-granting bail to criminals, what he terms criminals, and perhaps that's the reason why your friend Justice Owiny Dolo has now become a victim to such president's comments?
I think you are right. It seems to me that the Chief Justice is acting in fear of what President Museveni might do if he doesn't issue those irrelevant guidelines.
Now, this is kind of tricky. You borrowed the doctrine of separation of powers from the common law. Where does it leave it? Because you drafted this constitution and intentionally put it there. the doctrine of separation of powers. So
is,
is your judiciary now independent, or it has become now another bag into the cabinet?
It is the principle of separation of powers and independence of the judiciary threatened by these guidelines. I am not sure whether they are supposed to be submitted to Parliament for approval. But if that is the case, we still have ample opportunity for Parliament to reject them as irrelevant and inapplicable, because we already have the proper law in place.
Do you find this Parliament candid enough to object such? Do you find the present Parliament patriotic and strong enough to defy and object such statutory instruments with how you see it?
There are new members of Parliament and several old ones who think like me. And I hope they will raise their voice very loudly, rejecting these guidelines on the basis that they are already covered adequately by the present law. So that's what I hope will happen.
So in your view, what happens to any judicial officer that might defy such suggestions?
The Uganda Constitution, our laws currently applicable, and the rules of procedure are the ones to guide any new judge or judicial officer. He should be guided by that and not by a gloss on the constitution, laws of Uganda, proposed by the Chief Justice. They should be guided by the present law. That's what I would advise.
In the event that they are passed, let us assume that they are presented to Parliament and passed. What's your advice to citizens?
Then the rule of law is further undermined.
So,
and we would say in Uganda, the rule of law does not work. Only the decision of the executive operates.
There is one of the objectives here is to promote uniformity and consistency by courts when granting bail. Is that practical? Because cases have different...
Precisely. You can't have consistency.
And uniformity.
If you are choosing Kanyeihamba of rape and is applying for bail, different criteria is used to deny him bail. And the courts have those powers. If you are choosing him of simple theft, there is a different criteria the courts use to deal with this matter. So everything is in place. And as I have said, the proposals by the Chief Justice are unnecessary, counterproductive, and contradict some of the present family held rules of law.
When we are away this whole week, there is what stood up for people and your friends in particular who are in Buganda region. Why they ask, why did you consider Kampala not being a part of Buganda as per the constitution? And I want to quote from the very constitution where you people described Kampala, that Kampala, located in Buganda, shall be the capital city of Uganda and shall be administered by the central government. But also, Sabbatical 5, you went ahead to say the territorial boundaries of Kampala shall be delineated by the Act of Parliament. And when you read the definition of delineate, it means that Kampala's boundaries shall be described and defined by Parliament. What if Parliament wakes up in the morning and extends Kampala to reaching Masaka? Does Buganda lose the whole of that space to Kampala
This
and
is a
Uganda.
matter of negotiations. And we put in the constitution. We didn't leave anything by chance. When you decide to change the boundaries of
Kampala.
local government of Kampala, of Uganda Kingdom, there has to be consent, these negotiations, and the consent of the region you are affecting. And if you don't, then we built in a famous provision prohibiting such measure from becoming a law. So there is instructions, rather there is provisions covering that particular section to create harmony between the central government and the local government, whether it is of a kingdom, traditional ruler, or otherwise. There is a provision for that.
What informed you of such a provision as the constitutional framers at a time? What informed you of such a decision to have such an article that Kampala, because literally to many, and we have had this argument amongst Baganda and people in Central, saying that the constitution doesn't regard Kampala as being a part of Buganda, but rather a place located within Buganda.
We had all the arguments in the Constituent Assembly. Nobody made that argument. If they had it, they kept it to themselves. And the CA is not responsible for what we eventually agreed on by consensus. So it is like an afterthought. You cannot legislate on something you don't know. So my view would be, they never brought us to the attention of the Constituent Assembly. What we discussed is what they proposed, and we dealt with them adequately.
Was this supported by, did you get any endorsement by people from Central or Buganda in particular
yes,
to this regard?
At the time, the Minister for Local Government, also responsible for Central Region, was Bidani Sadi. Honorable Dandi Sadi. Later, the regions were defended and represented by Professor Apollo Nsimbambi. Anything that concerned Uganda or the kingdoms were in the hands of those representatives. So there was adequate
representation.
Adequate and sometimes passionate representation of those interests.
So in your view, there were no ill motives in regards to having Buganda, rather Kampala, the way it is understood in this constitution, no ill motives?
If we look at other countries, South Africa, Pretoria, capital. Canada, Ottawa, capital. Brazil, Brasilia. Tanzania, Dodoma. You compare those with Kampala. There is always a provision guiding the capitals of the country to be separately represented and governed by the
central government
of the country.
I think the argument here is because Buganda being a kingdom where it has its own cultural leader, but then you have a constitution that provides that that parliament may at some point determine the boundaries of that city And it goes back to the first question I asked you. What if Parliament wakes up in the morning and, extends the boundaries to Masaka? Where does the Buganda kingdom live, especially with it?
That extension would be illegal because they have not discussed it. Parliament has not discussed it with the people of Buganda or Masaka. But we lawyers and the commentators, politicians, we cannot physically prohibit bad laws put in the law. That is why our constitution says, even if the constitution of Uganda is taken compulsorily and is amended compulsorily by the powers that be, when the people regain their independence, the constitution shall be returned as it is now. That's why we put there that provision, knowing some madman or dictator can do away with the democratic decisions where the provincial legislatures have not been consulted. And if the constitution is restored, then what was done illegally automatically ceases to be law.
Being a student of history and constitutionalism, we have heard that one of the issues for which there was a conflict between Obote and Buganda was some people in Buganda telling him to shift the capital state from Buganda and take it away. Could that have been the same reason for which you had to make it constitutional that Kampala?
Yes, we had the evidence to that effect, and we rejected it. We said whether or not the capital is in Kampala or Jinja or elsewhere is a matter for our parliament, the supreme governing body. It's not for regional governments to demand that the central government should go elsewhere. They don't have that power in the constitution.
There are so many tricky articles that you people put in this constitution for which people want your clarification. You went ahead to provide that English becomes the official language of Uganda. For purposes of using the the golden rule to interpret the definition of national, one would assume that the national language would be indeed an indigenous language. Why did you choose Swahili, and yet it's not a national language, but rather a regional language to become our national language?
I personally chose Luganda as the most commonly spoken language in the country. But we were working on the basis of a consensus or majority decision. So we were overruled. But the idea of having Uganda, which is commonly spoken and understood in the West, in the East, North even understand it, has historical reasons. And one of the reasons is that ever since Uganda was created, Buganda has been considered more vital to the governance of this country than any other region, whether Ankole, Busoga, or others which had traditional rulers. Indeed, the name of Buganda was never there before. So the colonial first called it Buganda, but the Swahilis who were accompanying the British said Uganda.
Uganda, yeah.
But the Uganda is Buganda. Secondly, Uganda because the Europeans came here first, has remained more developed, economically viable, and many of the traditions in Uganda wish that it was independent on its own. So that's the historical background of why concentration in providing for Kampala,
Then Luganda, rather
yes,
Swahili.
became very important.
If I may ask, what are those arguments that the people who fronted Swahili as being a national language, what did they front as their reasons?
They were there. There is also a historical reason for that. Certainly, many people wanted us to adopt Swahili as a national language, and I wish we had.
No,
because as
Swahili or Luganda instead? Because you said you proposed
you are
the
talking
Luganda,
about
Swahili vis-a-vis
I said
Luganda.
that there were also many people, not the majority, there were many people who opted for Swahili as well. So we had
How many languages did you have?
advocating for Luganda, others English, others Swahili. It's not just one. Even 1, 2 from my area,
What did you
which is Ankole Kigezi, advocated for Runyastara.
being the national language?
Yes, or Chiga Runyankole as a national language. And the many people, like the Basoga, the Baganda, and the many of the Tesos, would have been able to communicate in those languages, and in particular in Uganda. But the consensus in CA was, no, let's adopt English.
As official and then Swahili as national.
That's right.
I ask you again, what reasons did they give you people to be convinced, to convince you to drop your Luganda because you had suggested Luganda being the national language and others? Which reasons did they have?
Those reasons were quite convincing also. One was that the Luganda was not understood nationally, rather internationally.
Okay.
Whereas
Swahili is...
and the Swahili was only understood by the countries of the
East Africa,
of the region, Eastern Africa, including considered members of Congo. Sadly, historically, the kings of Uganda, from whom we inherited Uganda, had always opposed Swahili as the common language to Uganda because they saw it as the back way to introduce federalism of the whole region. Because as you know, the Swahili is spoken in Kenya, Tanzania, and the parts of Congo very fluently. And the then Kawaka said, if we allow federalism, well, if we allow Swahili, and spoken by everybody in East Africa, we shall be opening the door for our kingdom being dominated through Swahili. That's one of the historical reasons they gave for rejecting Swahili as a dominant language in Uganda.
If I may ask, on behalf of our viewers, what was the procedure that you people would apply to have a certain article or idea passed vis-a-vis a certain the other article dropped? Was there a chance for minority report, and did you pick anything
There
useful?
was on a number of issues. For example, I can tell you the Legal and Drafting Committee, of which I was chairman, we recommend that the decentralization should be gradual. That was our unanimous decision of the whole committee known as the Legal and Drafting Committee. But the whole of CA rejected that. They said, no, we don't agree with the Legal and Drafting Committee. We want decentralization to take place as soon as possible. And that idea was supported by the Minister of Local Government.
Bidan Disadi, again, at the time.
And it prevailed.
So that means there was a room for a minority report, and there were a few things you could pick from the minority report. I want to conclude with chapter 4 for this discussion about the promotion of public awareness of the Constitution. And I want to take you to paragraph A, translating this Constitution. Why haven't you people, for the period you served as the Minister for Justice and Constitutional Affairs and definitely the Attorney General, what did you do or not do?
If I had the power, we would have started drafting it a day or two after we promulgated it.
Didn't you have power when you were Minister for Justice and Constitutional Affairs? Is it what you're trying to mean?
I didn't have the power to force the government to teach Swahili.
To translate the Constitution rather into...
To translate the
Constitution
in that. Had I power, the way I am thinking, and have been advising throughout my political life, we would have translated the Constitution in all the local languages. I would have volunteered to assist those translating the Constitution in the local languages of the West, where I understand most of the languages spoken there. And I would have recommended that somebody like Professor Fred Sempewa translate the Constitution in Uganda, assist them there. And I would have said Ben Watcher should assist those who are translating the Constitution in Lugo.
Okay.
But nobody believed in me to do that.
Did you ever front it in your cabinet meetings when you were either Minister for...
No, I did. Even when I was presidential advisor.
What would your boss say at the time?
No, for him, Museveni was for Swahili. But we were always overruled by the majority in the parliament.
That the Constitution be... So if I may ask, what are the... Okay, not to sound speculative, why do you think it hasn't been translated into other languages?
When I was Minister of Justice and Attorney General, I was interacted with my colleagues elsewhere. The Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Kenya and that of Tanzania, we became very close. And they would campaign through me that the Constitution should be interpreted in your languages, and they should also adopt Swahili. I would always agree with them. But as I say, the forces against me were always more successful. The cooperation we ministers had with one another was more focused and forward-looking than the view of our government collectively. So if you are 2, 3, or 4 voices in cabinet, and your colleagues are of this different view, their opinion will prevail, no matter how focused you are. That is the way of politics.
Okay, so paragraph B and Article 4 provides for teaching the Constitution to all educational institutions and armed forces and armed forces training institutions. I want to underline armed forces training institutions because I know, as far as we have read and known, you have taught constitutionalism in armed forces, in particular police and UPDF. Do they understand these things? If yes, how come they come here and beat us to death?
Enough, both the police and the UPDF or the army understand the importance of applying Swahili
teaching
system.
Teaching the constitution. Yeah.
Yes, I was coming to that, and of translating and saturating the meaning of our constitution and the content to the whole country. When we were in CA, we had famous generals. The late General Kandonda, General Tumine, who has recently passed on, more famously, General Serwangarwanga, and General Koleta. Some of these are still alive. They were comparing the reasons they gave for adopting and translating our constitution in local languages. You remember the previous act had said that the constitution shall be made by a combination of the army and the then consultative council. It is the army led by General Muntu who campaigned that no, we don't want this. We wanted the constitution to be debated and approved by all the people of Uganda. So they overruled us. That is what was happening. When we were talking about the participation of women in the governance in Uganda, the view of the late Serwangarwanga, Tinyefuza, and with the other general I mentioned, was that women should participate and give an advantage for the first term. Then they will learn governance and what it means to represent women. Then after that, the system should be opened by every woman to compete in their own right for that office. We did not take that seriously. The women who knew would be elected MPs knew that if that provision passed, they would only likely be in parliament one term, or if they were very good, they would be re-elected for a second term. But it was rejected, both by the women who wanted to have more than one term, and they did, and by members of parliament who knew that their election itself depended on support of parliamentary women members. So, when we were debating that provision, both Tinyefuza and Serwanga I believe that Tumine boycotted any protest. They didn't attend the session where we discussing women because we had rejected their idea. In my opinion, wrongly. I was chairman of the Legal and Drafting Committee, and I must confess at the time, I did not appreciate the arguments of those generals. Now I do.
Now you realize they were right.
Yes, and I was wrong, and they were right.
Okay, our viewers, we want to thank you for watching, but also for now to remind you that next week we shall tackle chapter 3 about citizenship. It is very confusing. I personally, I think I have 5 or so years for my citizenship to expire, because my ID shows a specific period of time for which my citizenship as Ugandan citizen will expire. We shall ask you to answer why should Ugandans have IDs that expire. Something you did not put in chapter 3 of the Constitution. That's about citizenship of Uganda. That's where we want to begin from next week.
Can I say this so people can ask questions?
Yeah.
Citizenship never expire.
It's what you will answer at length, because do you have a national ID?
Yes, Kanyeihamba? Ugandan unless you renounce it.
Do you have a national ID?
I have a national ID.
We shall have to prove
I have a passport.
which both have expiry dates.
Not as my passport is 10 years.
But your citizenship
that
also
has
has
nothing to do with the citizenship.
We shall
You lose your passport.
your national
You
your
no longer
citizenship.
apply for it. But your nationality as a Ugandan never ceases unless you renounce it.
Okay, we are beginning from that next week. And those of you with all expired, I think there are some people whose citizenship is expiring this year or next year. Those of us who have national IDs with expiry date, it's very worrying. And there was even a
And
case.
they have a problem with the current IDs.
Yeah, that's
Because when I went here, my village here in Buziga, the people who were issuing those IDs, who were assessing those who are entitled to you, were from Kabale. Because the chairman responsible for that was a colonel from Kabale.
yeah, Kwirinjira.
Yeah, Kwirinjira. So I asked them, you are now supervising the issuing of the, do you know the parents of the people here? I said, no. Do you know whether these people are from our area or not? Say, no. We were only invited to come and supervise the exercise and issue these. Now, so many of those issues.
There are so many irregularities with citizenship now.
I suspect, in my opinion, they were issued wrongly, and I was there with another Ugandan. Those young, Kanyeihamba is here. I jumped the queue and they issued mine.
Okay.
Then when I said, but this is a national exercise.
Yeah, sure.
Why are you treating it as if it is an exercise of the people from Kabale and the Kigezi? They laughed. This exercise of IDs is to determine who was NRM. So I want people to think and ask me the right question.
Yeah.
So ID was being issued initially for the support of NRM.
Okay.
Not for you being a citizen of Uganda.
Great. We are beginning from there next week. We shall answer these particular questions. One, on whether or not this entire process of national ID issuance was legal. That is one. We shall also hear from you on what entails in chapter 3, which talks in particular citizenship of this country. Why?
So I wanted to enlighten the viewers for next week.
Yeah.
When I was in the UK, I was a student, and I fell in love with an English girl. We got married there. We now have 3 children, 2 of whom have dual citizenship.
Yeah.
One
Ugandan
Those two
and UK.
are both Ugandans and
England,
British.
yeah.
Secondly, when somebody asked me, why did you marry a foreigner? I think, did you want me to go with prostitutes or a genuine wife?
Okay, viewers, next week, don't miss, going to be an interesting, personally, I have personal interests into this particular chapter. How did we come up to have dual citizenship and the rest? See you next week, Wednesday, by God's grace. He should tell us what they meant.
And in order to sharpen the viewers, when our first cabinet, in which Museveni served, and I served, our president was Rule. And that government, almost half of the cabinet were married to foreigners.
You inclusive.
Me inclusive.
Okay, people, see you next week Wednesday. Next week Wednesday, he will tell us why he chose to marry a foreigner, and could it have been the same reason?
I can answer now because I was in love.
Okay. Maybe you wanted to also have dual citizenship so that your wife can't be blocked with being there. But then we have taken another discussion next week.
I came back to Uganda, and one of my intentions is that my wife would come to Uganda
as a Uganda citizen. Okay.
Yes.
See you next week Wednesday. Very interesting. See you next week. Catch you up.
Thank you, Norman.
The Alternative Dig Talk. Real issues, real talk.
Fellow citizens, following the sequence of events, Uganda seems to be at political crossroads.
I'm not a servant of anybody.
Madam, I know the law.
As such, Alternative Digital brings you the Interface Show with retired Colonel Dr. Kiza Besuje.
Let's keep on the same page on Alternative Digital,
As he gives you the alternatives on the transition question, rule of law, human rights and freedom, youth inclusion in governance, economic stagnation, as he confirms.
I'll be always here Saturday from 10 a.m. in the morning. Be there.
Don't miss the live discussion on the Alternative Uganda, Digitalk TV Facebook pages, and the Alternative Uganda YouTube channel.
Migrant stakeholders run BR2 emisinde zigenda okubera ku ssaawa ekkololo ku Sunday nga 2 October. Tudduka okusonda ssente okuddaabiriza ekifo ekibudabuda bankuba kyeyo nga bakomyewo. Eddembe lya bannayuganda bakolebwe buvunaanyizibwa bwaffe era kitukakatako okulwanirira eddembe n'obwenkanya mu mirimu gy'abankuba kyeyo. N'olwekyo weetabe mu kuddaabiriza ekifo kino ng'ogula kiti ya $2.5 okuva ku petrol station za Shell Kabalagala, Shell Lugogo, Capital, Shell Najjanankumbi, Shell Nansana, Shell Namave ne Shell Buloba. Biwagidwa Star Times, Reham, Fresh Dairy, Roofings, Housing Finance Bank, Maritime Cargo. Olwo ne bikutusibwako ofisi ya President ku nsonga z'emitala w'amayanja, Uwera ne Migrant Workers Voice. Ne bitegekebwa Sinat Advertising.
The Alternative Dig Talk. Real issues, real talk.